mystery of the chupacabra. Between fear and imagination, have you ever stopped to think about how some stories just explode out of nowhere and take over everyone's imagination? The chupacabra is exactly that kind of legend. It appeared in the 90s and, suddenly, everyone was talking about this mysterious creature that attacked animals in the middle of the night. But what really happened? Could there be any truth behind this whole story? The beginning of it all. Puerto Rico in the 90s. It all started in Puerto Rico. Around 1995, picture the scene. Farmers waking up in the morning, going to tend to their animals, and finding their goats, chickens, and sheep dead. But it wasn't just any death. You know, the animals had strange marks on their necks, small holes, and the most terrifying part, completely drained of blood. It was as if something had drained every single drop. At first, 1 or 2 people reported this, but then it started becoming routine. More farms, more dead animals, always the same way. People panicked. After all, what kind of creature would do something like this? It didn't seem like a dog attack. It didn't seem like something human. It was something different, bizarre, unexplainable. That's when the name emerged naturally. Chupacabra? Simple and direct. A being that literally sucked the blood of goats. And look, the name caught on fast. Within weeks, all of Puerto Rico was talking about this monster. People were afraid to leave their animals loose at night. They started doing night watches, setting traps, trying to capture the creature. The legend spreads across Latin America, but the chupacabra didn't stay confined to a small Caribbean island. Like every good modern mystery, it spread like wildfire. A few months after the first reports in Puerto Rico, similar stories started appearing in Mexico, then in Chile, then in the United States, mainly in the border regions with Mexico. And you know what's most intriguing? The reports were frighteningly similar. Always dead animals, always holes in the neck, always without blood. It didn't matter if it was in a small Mexican village or on a farm in Texas. The pattern repeated itself. This made many people think, well, if so many people in different places are seeing the same thing, there must be some truth to it, right? Each region the legend reached added its own twist to the story. In Mexico, some people said they had seen the creature flying. In Chile, they said it had almost supernatural abilities, being able to climb high walls and disappear without a trace. In the United States, some conspiracy theorists began to speculate that the chupacabra could be the result of military experiments or even an alien creature. The monster's appearance, 1,000 faces. One of the most fascinating things about the chupacabra is that nobody can agree on what it actually looks like. The descriptions vary so much that they seem to be talking about completely different creatures. The most popular version, especially in the first reports from Puerto Rico, described a bipedal being, that is, one that walks on 2 legs like us. This version was between 90 centimeters and 120 meters tall, with grayish or greenish skin, large red eyes that glowed in the dark, and the most striking detail, a row of spines or spikes coming out of its back, from the neck to the tail. Some said it had short arms with long claws, and a mouth full of sharp fangs. In other places, mainly in Mexico and the southern United States, the descriptions were quite different. There, Many people swore that the chupacabra looked more like a dog or coyote, just with a bizarre appearance. It was described as a quadrupedal animal, extremely thin, almost hairless, with gray and wrinkled skin, visible ribs, and a terrifying face. Some said it had bulging eyes and fangs too large for its mouth. These differences in descriptions are interesting because they show how legends adapt to local culture. Each community shaped the chupacabra according to its own fears and cultural references. The chupacabra arrives in Brazil in the late 90s. The legend crossed borders and arrived in Brazil. And look, it hit like a bomb, especially in the Northeast. The first stories emerged in rural communities, where people live closer to nature and depend directly on raising animals. Imagine the impact. Humble families who depend on their chickens, goats, and sheep to survive, suddenly seeing their animals being mysteriously killed. The loss was real. The fear, too. And when you don't have an explanation for something, imagination fills in the gaps. The Brazilian reports followed the same pattern already known. Animals found dead at dawn, with marks on their necks, apparently without blood. But here too, stories emerged of people who had supposedly seen the creature, always at night, always fleeing quickly, always leaving just an impression of something strange and terrifying. The Brazilian press grabbed the case with force. TV programs sent teams to the countryside. Newspapers printed sensationalist headlines, and everyone had a theory. It was during this time that the chupacabra became part of the Brazilian popular imagination, entering their own folklore alongside the werewolf, the headless mule, and the curupira. I remember hearing these stories at school, and I can guarantee you it was kind of scary. There were people who avoided going out at night, especially if they lived in a more remote area. Children were frightened. Adults were on alert. It was that type of urban legend where everyone knew someone who had seen something strange. Science enters the scene as expected. Scientists didn't sit idly by in the face of all this hysteria. Over the years, researchers began to seriously investigate cases attributed to the chupacabra. And you know what they discovered? Much more mundane explanations than blood-sucking monsters. The main scientific explanation points to coyotes and domestic dogs infected with sarcoptic mange. This skin disease is caused by a microscopic mite that burrows into the animal's skin, causing intense itching. The animal scratches so much that it ends up losing all its fur. The skin becomes thick, wrinkled, and with wounds. The result? An animal with an absolutely horrifying appearance that barely resembles a normal dog. Furthermore, sick animals become extremely weak and desperate for food. This leads them to attack chickens, goats, and other small animals, even if they normally wouldn't do so. And here comes another interesting point. Scientists explained that the blood didn't disappear from dead animals. What happened was natural coagulation. When an animal dies and loses blood, most of it coagulates inside the body or on the ground, giving the impression that it disappeared. Several of these sick animals that were pointed out as the chupacabra were found and captured. DNA tests confirmed they were just coyotes, dogs, or foxes with severe mange. Mystery solved. Right? Why did the legend survive? Well, not exactly. Despite all the scientific explanations, the chupacabra continued to live on in popular imagination. And this leads us to an interesting question. Why do people continue to believe, or, at the very least, be interested in this story. First, because urban legends fill a very ancient human need. The need for mystery, for not having all the answers. In an era where science explains almost everything, we still want to believe that there are unexplainable things out there. It's exciting to think that there might be unknown creatures hiding in the shadows. Second, because the chupacabra became part of pop culture. It appeared in movies, TV series, cartoons, comics, video games. It became a character in horror stories. It became an internet meme. This constant presence in media keeps the legend alive, even when people rationally know it probably doesn't exist. Third, and perhaps most importantly, because the legend of the chupacabra represents real fears. For rural communities that depend on their animals, the threat of losing them is very concrete. The chupacabra gives a face, a form, to that diffuse fear. It's easier to deal with a monster you can imagine than with abstract threats like diseases, natural predators, or bad luck. The legacy of the chupacabra today, more than 25 years after the first reports, the chupacabra is a globally recognized icon. It entered the pantheon of great modern legends, alongside Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, and flying saucers. But unlike these other legends, which are older or foreign, the chupacabra is genuinely Latin American. It was born here, spread here, and became a symbol of our culture. It's a legend that unites Puerto Rico, Mexico, Brazil, Chile, and many other countries in a shared narrative. And you know, this has value. Legends are part of a people's identity. They tell stories about our fears, our hopes, our relationship with the unknown. The chupacabra may not be real in the physical sense, but it is absolutely real in the cultural sense. What if? Ni. At the end of the day, the big question remains in the air. What if there's something more? What if, behind all the scientific explanations, all the cases of animals with mange, all the collective hysteria, there exists a small core of truth? Maybe we'll never know. Maybe that's the beauty of it. Because as long as there's mystery, as long as there's that little bit of doubt, the legend will continue to live. And honestly, in a world where everything seems to have an explanation, where there's not much room left for the unknown, it's even comforting to know that there are still stories that make us question, imagine, and yes, feel a little fear. The chupacabra is more than a legend about a monster. It's a story about how we create narratives to explain the unexplainable, about how fear spreads and transforms, about how human imagination is powerful enough to create alternative realities. So, the next time you hear a strange noise at night, or see a shadow moving too fast in the dark, remember, it's probably just a dog, a cat, or the wind. Probably. But what if it isn't? What if, in that moment, you were face to face with one of the last truly mysterious creatures of the modern world? That's the magic of the chupacabra. It lives on the border between the real and the imaginary, between science and fantasy. And as long as we continue telling its story, it will continue to exist, perhaps not in the shadows of the night, but certainly in the shadows of our imagination.